This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta. Get the job done right the first time with Axial Max Cereal Herbicide Co-Pack for post-emergence grass and broadleaf weed control in Western Canada. New for 2025, Axial Max lets you manage resistance in your spring wheat and barley for cleaner, more productive fields. Visit syngenta.ca for more.
Good day and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, May the 21st. On this episode of the Word, dang, it's gotten cold. Hey, is it dry or is it wet in Ontario? That's a great question. There is more resistance developing. We just have to keep managing for that. And then it's agronomy answers. We are going to talk cereal forages. We are going to talk cold imbibition. We will talk water hemp. And we will talk sulfur. The chances of me getting to all that is really, really slim. But there's lots to talk about. Let's go! Yes, it has gotten cold. In fact, 10 degrees Celsius below normal temperatures. Now remember, Nature Nut Nick and normal, I love the quote, put your head in the freezer, put your feet in the oven. On average, you're comfortable. So that's the way normals work. This is a cool spring, no doubt about that. It does have impacts, but it's just part of the normal when you work it all out together. And thankfully, it's cold, but it's cold at a time of the year when that's okay. Slow soybean emergence, slow corn emergence, but the cereal crop is loving these temperatures. No doubt about that. It would like more sunshine. That is the one thing I've had several people tweet to me. Hey, Pete, you gotta be a happy camper, baby, because these are wheat temperatures. Yeah, they're wheat temperatures. But what we really need for high wheat yields is cool, bright, sunny days. And so we have the cool, but we're missing the bright, sunny. That's for sure from that standpoint. And on that note, Adam tweeting to me, hey, these temperatures, still planting my last corn. Do we go deeper than 2 inches? And the data is pretty clear. With corn, we want to be in the soil 2 inches deep, and maybe you go 2 1/4, maybe you go 2 1/2. It depends on your soil type. Heavy clay, we've decided 3 inches is generally too deep. The real scratch your head of it is that there's very little downside risk to go to 2 1/4, 2 1/2 versus 2 inches. And sometimes there's an upside risk, or not a risk rather, but an upside yield potential. That's all awesome. And then Dr. Dave comes into the conversation, as he often does. The science comes out and he says, this whole concept of why we get higher yields as we go deeper and the temperature fluctuation driving that is simply a hypothesis, which means we don't have the science to know why going deeper helps. And yes, there is limits to going too deep. But anyway, it's just kind of funny that Dave stepped in and said, plant 2 inches deep. That science is solid. We're not sure why. Yeah, and meanwhile, on the rainfall front, oh my gosh, we have Mark tweeting out from, I'm going to call it the Dungannon Desert. Now, Mark's actually at Port Albert, but Port Albert and Dungannon aren't that far away, and Dungannon Desert is alliteration. And if you know Wheat Pete, he loves alliteration. Mark saying the wheat had used so much moisture, they were so dry that the wheat was into leaf roll. Meanwhile, we go south of London, and that stretch, it was so wet last year. Dr. Dave's in that. My good friend Mark's in that. They can't catch a break and sitting on their hands just wanting to get out to the field to plant, but never getting fit ground. It will come, but as Adam Pfeffer from Bayer Crop Sciences tweeted out, he farms south of St. Thomas there. Yeah, got started early. Looks like we're going to have 3 planting windows. Some stuff got in April, some stuff got in mid-May, but it looks like we may well finish in June. That's just, that area cannot catch a break. Well, it could be worse. Mark from Delmarva sending me some pictures. They got hail like crazy. So some soybeans getting pretty beat up because they're above ground. Remember, the growing points on soybean comes above ground. The corn, it was well advanced, but still the growing point was below ground. It should be fine. But yeah, Mother Nature just continues to throw all sorts of weird, wild, and wonderful things at the farmers of North America. Hey, Woody's sending me a really cool pictures from my good friend Aaron Breimer. He's now an independent agronomist at Moose Ag. And Woody has been doing this real cutting edge stuff with row mow and with perennial clovers, low growing perennial clovers. They all died out on him last year from slug damage or we're not sure what he's reestablishing. So he has winter wheat planted because that was a wheat peat recommendation. It's winter wheat, twin rows, and nothing in between to let the clovers get them reestablished. So that winter wheat is really good at showing up the differences in nitrogen. And some of those pictures, it is astounding where there was no winter perennials, because Woody's a great guy for doing plot work, where there was no perennials. Man, that the map comes back solid red. It is nitrogen deficient. Where there were perennials, much better growth, much darker green, and you go, interesting. Because typically we wouldn't necessarily expect to see that in the wheat crop, because the perennials wouldn't have dumped enough of that nitrogen out of the perennial clover. Looks like we're seeing something there. It's just a bunch of fun. And thanks Woody, we just keep learning. Meanwhile, we go to Essex County. The wheat is heading, and the Fusarium risk just seems to keep moving north. Now, for the people in Essex County, the wheat is heading. I can't seem to get Decision Farms and the Doncast model to run. I have to talk to Dr. Dave again and see if I can sort that out. What I will say is if your wheat is heading right now, nighttime temperatures below 9 Celsius means that it's all good. The Fusarium risk will be low, but that's just the very front end of it. For the winter barley that is heading out right now as well in the London to Stratford area, those low nighttime temperatures are going to reduce our Fusarium risk, so that's a real benefit. As of May 26th, looks like all of that changes and we get into nighttime temperatures above 9 Celsius. That's when the majority of the wheat crop is likely going to start heading. In fact, we get into some really warm night temperatures once we get into June, if the weather forecast is correct. 18 degrees Celsius in Essex County after, I think, about the 26th of May or into that early June time frame. That's not good for the wheat crop, those warm nights. That's not what I want to see. However, once we get above 9 Celsius, we do look like we could have some fairly high Fusarium risk, so just pay attention to when that crop heads out. The other thing about these temperatures is, these cool temperatures are ideal for mildew to develop in the wheat crop. Remember, once you're at boot stage, once you see that head starting to swell in the crop, you cannot use strobe fungicides, full stop. If you have to do something, and there's more and more reports, the other thing is get out and scout your fields. If you haven't sprayed a fungicide, more and more reports of stripe rust that has overwintered. We now have it at Ilderton. We have more reports at Mitchell. And one of the common things, and I think we saw this last year, 25R64, awesome wheat variety, has a few issues with some other falling number things, but from a yield standpoint, awesome wheat variety. Well, last spring, when we got into the stripe rust problem that we had from all the spores moving up early from the U.S., not the situation we're in this year, but we found out that R64 is far more susceptible to stripe rust than what the data suggested. Why that is, not 100% sure. But man, a lot of the overwintering stripe rust seems to be in R64. When you look at other Pioneer varieties or other varieties that don't have high susceptibility, we don't see it. Now, in fairness to R64, it's on a lot of acres, and so, but I just, from that perspective, if you have R64, get out there and scout for stripe rust, because if you have stripe rust, and you are 5 days away from your Fusarium fungicide, man, you almost have to get out there and spray, because stripe rust likes these cool temperatures as well. If you do go out and spray a T2 fungicide, if you're a bit further north and you're just at flagleaf stage now, which is kind of where we're at as we get to London and north, you get to that stage of T2 fungicide, you're wondering yes or no, you're seeing a fair bit of mildew. Remember that the fungicides only give decent control of mildew. You can spray it on stripe rust, you get basically 100% control. You stop it dead. Not so with mildew. Mildew control is good, but you probably don't wipe it all out, so don't expect perfect control from that standpoint. And while I'm on a little bit of a more negative tone, which I hate being negative, Wheat Pete loves to be positive, but yes, John Tooker in Pennsylvania, he is the entomologist there, alfalfa weevil that is suspected to be resistant to pyrethroids, and one of the reasons they think that it's developed resistance is because pyrethroids were really cheap and a lot of people would just throw them in the tank if they were going over the field. Well, 2 counties in Pennsylvania, highly likely that they have resistant alfalfa weevil to the pyrethroids. I don't like this automatic spraying. I really think we have to do better than that. But at the end of the day, if it's in Pennsylvania, eventually it will likely get to Ontario. So pay attention and scout your fields for alfalfa weevil. For most of Ontario now, we are moving into the stage where alfalfa larvae will be doing their maximum feeding damage. Get out there, scout, look at the tips of those plants. If you have it and you're not going to harvest in the next 5 to 7 days, you probably should control those alfalfa weevils. I haven't heard anything that's heavy pressure yet, but they certainly had it in Ohio, and that means we should be looking here in Ontario. Okay, next, just before I get into the whole rye triticale thing, I was out doing some field scouting, and a great job of strip tilling into some cover crop oats. The oats were not controlled last fall. Yes, winter killed them this year, but they got out in head, and they were big and stemmy and just like really, really tough to deal with. And what happens is that you take that super stemmy oat residue and it doesn't break down, and it's really hard not to get that worked into the trench. We'll link the little video that I did on that. You can see that there's some oat residue right down in with the corn seed. And that oat residue may well give off some allelopathic chemicals and not let that seed develop as uniformly as we would like. Conversely, in Johnson's own oat stubble, I sprayed it off too early last fall, and we didn't get enough growth, and this spring it looked like we hadn't even used cover crop oats. And I like to see some residue in between the strip till, because it just gives more soil protection. So the cover crops are awesome. They need to be managed. Don't let them get too stemmy. And Pete was a little gun shy, I guess. He didn't let them get quite stemmy enough. All right, I want to move on. I want to talk about rye and triticale as forages, because we're getting lots of questions, lots of comments. We are learning tons. One of the things, and I mean, we knew this, but are we ever seeing it in spades? Talking with Gord, early planted forage rye, just coming off with incredibly high yields, just awesome quality, high yields, perfect forage for a dairy herd. The later planted rye that Gord put in, I mean, it's still going to make forage, but just much lower yields. If we want to make this system work, we have to plant early. I talked about this last week. I made the mistake of saying, that's almost a free crop, and then I corrected myself. But Greg immediately jumped on me and said, Peter, we've done it. It is not a free crop. Oh my gosh. You've got the seed cost. You've got the nitrogen cost, which you keep pushing us to put on more nitrogen. And Vince saying, yeah, we put on 80 pounds of nitrogen on this triticale crop, because that's what Wheat Pete said to do. Mind you, the crop that Vince grew was pretty amazing. So, but it's not for free. And the other thing that Greg said in his situation was that when he grew corn silage following that triticale crop, because the corn silage was planted later and because the triticale had used moisture, that he would give up yield. Even planting soybeans in Greg's situation, he said he lost 5 bushels in yield, and he felt it was just because he had that much less moisture. So let's step back and think that through. First, the data comes from Tom Kilser. Tom does most of his work in Pennsylvania and New York. They are longer season areas than what we get in parts of Ontario. Our season is shorter. That means that you could well take less silage yield. But honestly, I don't really enjoy the thoughts of growing corn silage after a cereal forage, because it's tough to get a good seed bed for corn. You can do it, but it's tougher, and you do delay corn planting. Plant soybeans. And in many cases, growers are telling me that they can get a full soybean crop following a cereal crop, especially if you're going to grow rye as that cereal crop. It better be soybeans, because we know there's a allelopathy of the rye on the corn crop. But I really like this William from Quebec reaching out and saying, Peter, this sulfur on soybeans, when I no-till after my rye crop, I like to plant green in those soybeans, and if I'm going to use sulfur, I'll put it on V2, V3. Well, first off, William also said that he decides when to tolerate his rye crop based on moisture. If there's lots of moisture, he doesn't mind the rye using some extra moisture. He'll plant green. If it's dry, he takes the rye out early so that it doesn't use that moisture. So moisture matters, and that means that soil type matters, because some soils, heavy clay soils, they hold a lot of water, but they don't release a lot of water, so they are more drought prone. The sands are more drought prone. My expectation is that this double cropping using a cereal forage works a lot better on soils that have more moisture available, because Greg is right. Moisture does matter, and I really think if you get enough moisture, you can grow a full soybean crop. I think it gets much more challenging if you grow a corn crop. And William, for goodness sakes, you're going to put sulfur on, and I think that's a perfect idea according to the data from Sean Castile, but you have to do it at planting, because it's all about nodulation, and soybeans stop nodulating at V6. All right, I need to move on because I want to get through a fair bit yet. James from Cache Bay sending me a picture of the temperatures saying, do I plant or not? Cold rain coming. Do I plant soybeans or not? Kevin from Essex saying, so how long does a soybean have to be in the ground? And we're all coming back yet again to this whole thought process of cold water imbibition, and it's real. But Horst Bonner, our awesome soybean specialist for the Ministry of Agriculture and Food here, saying, Peter, when I asked him, Peter, it's May 20th. Plant soybeans. And he went on to say that cold water imbibition, it seems to captures people's imagination, and it is real, but we talk about it a lot more than we actually see damage. So let's quickly run through the thought process. When you have dry soybean seed, you lose the structure of the cell membranes. As that soybean seed re-wets, it has to reestablish the structure of the cell membranes. If it doesn't, then things leak out of the seed, enzymes are damaged, and you damage the vigor of that plant. So that's the cold water imbibition issue. Interestingly enough, the drier the seed is, the more subject it is to cold water imbibition problems, because it probably has to suck in more water, and those cell membranes are actually less structured. But as we re-wet that seed, we need to reestablish those cell membranes. If you do that with really cold water, you don't get the cell membranes to reestablish their structure appropriately. With soybeans, 25% of the water they imbibe go into the soybean seed in the first 2 hours. And this is without a damaged seed coat. If you have a damaged seed coat, it's even faster. But 25% in the first 2 hours, 60% of the water it's going to imbibe happens in the first 4 hours. So in terms of damaging that cell membrane and not letting it reestablish, those first few hours are absolutely critical. We talk about 24 hours, but realistically, hour 1 is the most important. Hour 2 is the next important. If you can get through hour 4, you're probably in pretty good shape. And it's also about the rate of water uptake. Because if you put a soybean in dry soil, it does not imbibe 25% of its water in the first 2 hours. If you put it into soil that has good moisture, then it will imbibe fairly rapidly, but it'll imbibe slower in a clay than it will in a silt loam, because it's just how the water moves in the soil where you really get hammered. And this helps make sense of why this is, where you really get hammered, is you put that seed in the soil, and within the first hour, you get a big, cold thunderstorm. So now, whether you're a clay soil, you're a silt soil, you're a sand soil, that first hour and the seed has access to all the cold water it could ever absorb, because you just basically saturated the whole soil profile. Now we have cold water imbibition. If you don't get that thunderstorm, if you don't have that rapid availability of super cold water, you almost never see it. In fact, Horst Bonner said that he had planted soybeans at 0 degrees Celsius. That night, it went to minus 10 degrees Celsius. No cold water imbibition damage at all. So it really does come down to speed of imbibition as well as just how dry the soil is and what that water temperature is. Okay, I hope that helps. At the end of the day, just go plant soybeans. That's all there is to it. Unless you see that cold thunderstorm coming, and then maybe an hour before, 2 hours before, you rethink that go plant soybean strategy. All right, I have time only to deal with water hemp. Harry saying, hey, Peter, water hemp. So we have water hemp in the area. One farm has it quite bad. Their dairy farm, where it came from, we're not sure, but they have it. It goes into the manure because they take it off as silage. The custom manure guy comes in. He spreads their manure. Can we spread that water hemp through the manure? And I said, well, it's possible, but that's not the biggest concern. And Mike Shriver jumped in, and good for Mike. He's with BASF now. He did his master's on water hemp with Dr. Peter Sikkema. And the data says that you get 99% seed mortality of that water hemp through the manure. So could you spread it through the manure? Yes, it's possible, but that's not the real threat. The real threat is the tillage machine. You get a custom guy come in where there is water hemp. He does tillage. The next farm he goes to is going to have water hemp. Have a nice day. Custom combine operators, similarly, the custom harvester. And the other question Harry asked is, what about birds? Yes, birds can spread it as well. So with water hemp, manure, not the issue. And thanks, Mike, for that great insight into how that particular weed works. But yeah, tillage, combine, harvesters, birds, they all are going to spread water hemp. If it's in your area, you have to pay attention whether you like it or not. And with that, I am out of time. That's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, May 21st. Hey, keep the feedback coming, and I'll keep talking, which is what I do every Wednesday. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Syngenta. Stack the deck in your favor in 2025 with the Stacked Cereals lineup of fungicides and herbicides from Syngenta, and earn partner program points on qualifying purchases. Visit syngenta.ca/partner program to calculate your rewards today.